The whole world has a common enemy all across all the borderlines, all the invisible borderlines, as you know them to be, from one nation to another, all nations, all segments of divisions, dividers of the human race, of mankind creation, all over the terrestrial plane. Whether you believe that we're in a dome, a flat earth, or a globe, all across the terrestrial plane, we all share a common enemy. The word culture comes to mind. The culture of this, the culture of that. Oh well, that's just Christian culture. That's just Muslim culture. Oh well, that's just the country music culture. Oh, that's just hip hop culture. Oh, that's just biker culture. Just giving you examples here. Culture this, culture that, right? You can go ahead and use all the derivatives of that word culture attached to that, because they're all one and the same. So when you break down the word culture itself, it's got the word cult in it. Now, without doing too much, research, you can already see the base ground level surface of what that word represents. It's a hard rooted fundamentals. That's what the word culture means. Cults, or cults, deriving from the word cult or occults, right? It's a set of hard cemented set of ideologies that are instilled in the hearts of man. That's what the word culture and cults represent. And it's all around us. Everything is a culture. The culture of this, the culture of that. And you can be cemented in several different styles of cultures, while they all have the same purpose, the same common purpose in mind. They all serve the same purpose, which is to keep you from something greater, something that truly gives you the identity that you were created to have, that you indeed were created with, to separate you from the true authenticity of your creation. All have the same common purpose. All cultures, cult ideologies. And they all fall, all the ones that we love, all the ones that were cemented in us from birth, since we were children, one way or the other. It doesn't matter what avenue you went, one way or the other, this agenda was carried out. You see, my grandmother might have wanted me to be a good Christian man, a good Christian man, a man of principles and biblically based principles when I was young, and she tried, she would take me to her 7-day Adventist church, as much as she could. Even though my mother wasn't really, she had her own experiences, because when she was young, my grandmother was involved in other things that were, even more occultic, damaging than the 7-day Adventist church. So, she had her reasons for her trauma, her trauma there. But my grandmother tried, and her idea, in her best of well-being, of who she became to be towards the end, towards the latter end of her life. She corrected a lot of things, and in her mind, that was what she wanted. She wanted the best for me in that sense. Grandmother had a lot of flaws. And she would say she wasn't exactly right, all the way right in the head. She lacked, for lack of a better term, she lacked a couple screws. And but within that, she was trying, and I did get that from her. And I, as the analytical person that I am now, looking back at how she was, I can see the patterns of mental illness here and there, struggles, things that she struggled with. But nevertheless, she definitely tried to a degree. So I bring her up because she had in mind, as the most benevolent, as the best case scenario, to try to instill some kind of a biblically based belief system in me, to try to get me to follow better foot, to follow a more righteous path than anything that might have been presented to her in her life, and I do appreciate that. Now, there's no mistakes when you are with the Father. When you come to the understanding and the knowledge of things, you understand that there are no mistakes. They're just lessons. And the Father allowed my grandma to be in my life, to be my grandmother, because it was all part of the plan. But analyzing things, the reason why I use her as an example is because in her mind she thought that was, and it was, to a degree, it was a better option, right? So we are born, we're raised up with all these ideologies and all of these base level indoctrinations and ideologies, that you can classify it as cultures, that bring you to a point, that try to guide you and direct you, right? And the higher beings and the higher powers that be, the common enemy that I say we all have, all of us, all across the board. And if you have blood through your veins, and you are of the human race, Okay, not a certain pigment of skin, not, you know, whether your eyes are squinted or your lips are big. You know, we all have the same common enemy. And that enemy is into the details of culture, heavily, very cunningly, very integrated into everything culture. And that was one, that was part of my culture as growing up, being raised and partially raised as a child in in an island where there's a lot of poverty, and satanic type of occultic, ritualistic behaviors are custom as part and have been injected as part of the culture of that environment of which I grew up in. What they call voodoo, you might know it as voodoo, or you know, you name it, satanic style rituals. Growing up with the alternative of Seventh-day Adventists, something that directed the attention from blatantly doing things for a malignant God towards doing things towards following a benevolent God. It's a step in the right direction for a lot of folks that are raised and grow in that environment. So, but nevertheless, our enemy is into the details, right? So, growing up, I did have that experience. And later on, when I came to the States, still a child, came to the States legally, I got to experience the American culture, still within my quote unquote peers, within the type of folks that came from where I came from, but still in a more quote unquote North Americanized scenery, because it is what it is. I mean, the folks that came from where I came from on this land will never be the same. And I mean like bloodline related, not, you know, folks that were born here with parents from where I came from. They will never know truly, or hold that true essence of what it was like. Now, you could even question that since I came so young, how much of that culture was instilled in me. And it was enough for me to remember. It was enough for me to remember fundamentals of what that felt like, but not enough to completely tilt me over, right? So I was able to contrast on a balance scale. On a balance level, I was able to contrast what it was like to be born in that place and then being raised in another with less restrictions and more opportunities, quote unquote, more opportunities and things like that. But it doesn't matter what avenue, you know, some may feel that you have more favor or more sense of freedoms in one area than others, less oppression when it comes to government infringements and government, you know, putting their foot in your situation, and even though nowadays those lines are starting to blur and starting to look a lot like each other, but nevertheless, our common enemy has a plan. No matter where you are at, he has a plan they have a plan for whatever avenue you may land on. Because their goal is not to truly grant us freedom or truly grant us truth and knowledge of that truth. The goal is to keep us divided from truth and incarcerated behind bars that they control, whether we have the ability to feel, to touch, and see those bars or not. Their goal is to have those bars there. Their goal is to keep us caged, whether we understand it or we know it or not. Okay. So like I was watching a piece of a podcast, and I believe he's a Green Beret. His name is Nicholas Irvin, I believe his name is, and I don't know entirely a whole lot about him as a person, but I have found myself to agree with a lot of the statements that he has made, and his perspective as far as what I've seen. You may have seen something that you disagree with from that individual, or your perception or your understanding on who he is as a person may differ from what I've seen, and that's okay. I have seen enough from him to thus far, establish that me and him have a lot in common as far as understanding of our common enemy. And I saw a piece of a podcast on this channel that's known more for like interviewing like hip hop artists from mid 2000s and like, you know, hip hop culture style. It's a little more mature, not as in the ignorance of the nonsense of all this new stuff going on. It's a little more mature, that can cater more to like the older hip hop head, if you know what that term means, or whatnot. I'm just telling you what the podcast basically, but it's done very professionally, and however you feel about the guy that runs that's a whole nother situation. But that's the channel. It's called Vlad TV. Okay, and there was a cut scene there of podcasts that Nicholas Irvin. Sorry if I'm butchering that. I'm funny with names and saying words. And he and basically he was telling his story on when he was overseas and the different areas that he was at and how he felt the hospitality that from those other cultures that he hasn't even felt in what we call the southern hospitality of our country here on the North America. Okay, and I understood perfectly what he was talking about. Him being a vet and a trained marksman, and all his accolades and all his accomplishments as a military man. However you may feel about that, but he has a very meaningful perspective, and I'm very glad that he shares that. And the only thing that his perspective, especially on that podcast and many others that I've seen, he's basically saying always the same thing. He's on the same line, path of thinking that I am when it comes to the subject of politics to a great degree. Thus far, he may have said something that may differ from how I feel about certain things according to my spiritual fundamentals, but thus far, something he said was according to the hospitality that he experienced while he was in one of the most meaningful, one of the most pronounced gunfights that he had on a strip in a tear down neighborhood out there overseas. And he says that these are of the Muslim culture. And he says that there was this one lady that she would stick her head out in the midst of the fight, And mind you, when you say fight, when you're talking about marksman, you're talking about it could be from the picture he was painting. I'm assuming that he was in a situation where he was probably across a block, within half a block or a block away, and within buildings. And you have a marksman, a sharpshooter, a sniper, down the field and in an area where he's well hidden and they're well hidden on the other side. And he may have a spotter, and he has his own spotter or his own team, on the other side. And this is the fight. The fight means that what it means is that if you peek your head out in the wrong spot and you get spotted, you're dead. That's the fight. Okay. So it can look like nothing's going on if you were just to step on the scene, but there is a fight going on because there's a dude over there that's real quiet, hiding, that's trying to blow your head off, and you're trying to do the same. Okay. For whatever reason that came to be, that's part of the point. But aside from that point, there was this lady that kept peeking her head out, and she's one of the residents of that, or citizens of that area. And he mentions that she will come and feed her team. She will come and present. Oh, here we go. She will come and present her best platters, like what he described, as like the nice, best platters that they would have, like silverware or whatever, and come and feed them. The lady would feed them food, and said that she would communicate with him. I'm assuming that they had some kind of translator, and I'm pretty sure, and that the conversations that they were having with this lady that would come and feed them were profound. And I can only imagine. And it's funny how you have the most profound, most meaningful conversations in the most diverse and unlikely places. I don't know if you can relate, but one of the things that he mentioned that she said was that they didn't hate the American people, him being an American soldier, American fighter, that they didn't hate the American people. They understood that they were just people, just like them. They understood that there was basically a common enemy. Now, this is not his words, but this is the gist of the conversation as he describes it. Basically saying that they hated our government, but they didn't hate our people. They understood that there was a divider, that there was a difference there. There was a difference between the American people and the American leadership when it comes to politics and governments. And the only thing that I can equate that picture he was painting there in his experience was the Battle of Ypres, World War One, 1914, I believe. So go read up on it if you don't have a good recollection of, or a good, or any knowledge on that. But basically, it had to do with enemy combatants on a beach, and believe it was a beach, and it came to a halt. The gunfire came to a halt, and it was around Christmas. Again, it's aside from the what we think about Christmas and all that. I'm trying to paint you a picture. It was around a common holiday that most folks have been indoctrinated and born into a culture of believing to be a family holiday, a time of family gathering and wholeness. Okay, and this battle was going on. Two rival enemy combatants, one from one country, another one from a different country. Again, you can go educate yourself on that. The gist of that situation is that they both ended up reaching to each other very cautiously and realizing that they had a lot in common. They made a contact while they had a ceasefire among themselves. And they were even playing soccer and sharing stories and showing pictures of their families and their children, and they were sharing food with each other, and they're realizing that they had more in common with each other than their leadership was telling them that they had. And that story is very, very, it hits me very profound. So the Battle of Ypres, 1914, go read up on that. And back to Irvin Nick, he mentions that how he understands that basically the gist of that conversation, I'm not using his words, I'm using my own words, but the gist of what I got from his explanation on that podcast was that we all have a common enemy. And our common enemy usually comes in front of us with a smile. And it comes from the same ground, the same soil that we step on. And tells us things from birth and gives us ideologies and and injects us with cult-like thinking and ideologies to get us to believe a narrative that they want us to believe in order to keep us from the correct path of truth of who we are and we were created to be. We all have the same common enemy. And a lot of times, not a lot of times, all of the time, is the one that instigates us to fight against the other one that is just like us. When I was a kid, example of it, when I was a kid, there was this young, I was already in the States. Must have been 12, 13 years old, maybe, give or take. And in a building that I lived at with another kid that was a buddy of mine from the building, and we went to the same school, we were in the same grade, we were buddies because we had those commonalities, and we were buddies, and we were always like talking about, we wanted to, at the MTV days, in a big city. It was nowhere near as big as it is now, but we had aspirations as being indoctrinated by MTV music videos and and the music culture of that time, and we kids fantasizing about being famous and being musicians and stuff like that, and we had a lot of common things, but for the most part we always had a good time together, as kids would, locking on the door, on the weekends and after school. It was like, hey, what are you doing? Oh no, I gotta wash dishes or whatever. I'll be out when I'm done. I was like, all right, cool, And there was this other kid that was in a couple of grades above us. Now this kid, he looked like he was one of like he was in the same grade. He looked like he could have been in the same grade as us and more or less the same age, because he had some kind of a physical deficiency of some sort. Now, that never, when you're a kid, you don't really like, we weren't really, at least me and my other friend, we didn't really like look down upon him because of any of that. Matter of fact, we thought he was kind of cool, We thought he was kind of cool, he knew some karate. He told us, his mom would take him to karate classes and stuff, but he was in a few grades above us. But apparently this kid, he had some kind of jealousy over us because of, I guess because of his deficiencies, that we didn't look at him like he had any deficiencies, any physical differences. But I guess in his own mind, he was shorter, like I said, he could have looked like he was in the same grade as us. I think we were just finishing elementary and entering, now we might have already been in middle school, but he was a few grades above us. But he was short, and one day, us not hanging out with him a whole lot, but enough to know, a bit about him, But you don't know somebody until you know somebody, And one day we're hanging out. I'm hanging out with him, okay? And we're upstairs, I think it must have been either weekend or, his mom knows my mom, single parent at this point. And I'm hanging out, and he's telling me, he knocks on my door, actually. He comes looking for me. And we go hang out in his apartment upstairs, hang out for a little while. And he starts to throw his pitch of, hey, Buddy over there, I'm not gonna say his name. Buddy over there, he was talking crap about you. Yeah, he said that you were this and that, and blah blah blah, and yeah, he was like telling. He told me that you were doing that and this and the other, and that you said this, and yeah, he's lying about you, and he said he'll beat you up and that kind of stuff. And later on, I come to find out that earlier, before he knocked on my door, he had knocked on his door, and he had told him the same thing about me. Okay, you see where this is going, right? And controlling and creating a narrative to get us to fight, basically. And we're good kids, man. We were good kids. There was a lot going on at that time. The hip hop, the rap, gangster rap culture was a thing. But I was, me and Buddy we were decent kids for the most part. We weren't cut up. I mean, the gang culture was just down the road, down the block, and we knew, older kids and in high school and just out of high school that were from the neighborhood, but they took care of us for the most part, and we were neighborhood kids, and we were outside of that that lifestyle. We were decent kids for the most part, so we're not thinking, at that time, I'm not thinking I'm being manipulated by this dude that we think that he's kind of cool. He's a little older than us and he likes to hang out, or we'll pass a frisbee or a football from time to time. We're not thinking that this guy, is trying to do anything, but he has evil in his heart. He has evil in his heart, and he's trying to get me and my good buddy to fight. So, long story short, he had already convinced him. Apparently he had told him, yeah, just wait. I'll let you know. I'll talk to him, And he had convinced me. And eventually I go to his door and I knock on his door, on my buddy's door. And I tell him, hey, such and such. I'll say, I'm not gonna stop. Buddy, I saw him. Buddy told me that you were said this and that and the other, and that you think you can beat me up and blah blah blah. And he was like, no, I didn't say that. You said he said that about me. I was like, nah, you were saying that, and I was like, wait, hold on. So I go back. This happened a couple times because things weren't adding up. But we were so innocent, so innocent that I would keep going back to the dude, telling him, hey man, he said that this and that and the other. It's like, no man, that's not what he said, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay. So I had a little bit of martial arts training when I was a kid, when I was even younger. Actually in the island, my dad had a friend that knew, he was from the Asian descent, and he just, I don't know, he knew a lot of stuff, and he taught me and the neighborhood kids of my dad's neighborhood. He taught us quite a few things, all scattered. It was basically mixed martial arts, MMA, when MMA wasn't even a thing. This dude knew Thai boxing, regular boxing. He knew karate, like the Japanese karate. He knew Aikido. He had knowledge of Kung Fu, but mostly he had knowledge of more combat-based martial arts. Not to say that Kung Fu can't fight. I'm just saying Kung Fu there's a lot of things in Kung Fu that don't really translate in actual martial arts when it comes to really hurting somebody else. There's a lot of artistic value to Kung Fu outside from the discipline and combat, you know. Like there's sports that are strictly combat and efficiently and just doing that when it comes to martial arts. So I knew a little bit. I knew how to throw a kick in different ways effectively. And I could I can't do any of that now. A little bit. And I could throw some elbows and I didn't even though this evil kid got us to confront each other and got him outside and got us to basically fight while I was physically doing that. I didn't feel it in my heart, you know. I didn't want to hurt him. I kept kicking him in the arm, you know, like in the like just between the elbow and you hit somebody in that bone between the muscle, between the tricep muscle and your shoulder muscle and your delt. You hit them correctly, you can knock off, you hit nerves and stuff, and you can drop debilitate their arms by hitting them. You know, you can do that with a punch, or you can do that with a kick. When I was young, a buddy of mine, it's your birthday, we gotta hit you every time. I would just get one hit, you know, because I knew how to hit. I still do, but so I was trying not to hurt him. In my heart, I didn't want to hurt him. He was my friend, you know. Now he was hyped up too, and he saw that he needed to defend himself. So, long story short, I kicked him a couple times. He rushed at me. I knocked him down, and I held his arms. I didn't intend to hit him. I could have hurt him pretty bad if I really wanted to, but I didn't want to. The whole time I was half cocked because I didn't feel right, you know. And I held his arms, and one of those, his hand got loose, and he palmed me in the nose. And my nose is probably still a little crooked because of him. Hey, Humbug, if you ever watch this. And yeah, nickname, that's not his real name. So he got his palm in. I bled a little bit, no big deal. But the story, basically the point of the story is that later on we realized, obviously our parents coming to the conclusion that Buddy had it in his heart to flip us on each other for his own amusement, apparently. You know, after that he hid from us. After that he didn't, you know, he had it was a bullshit apology. I'm sorry, forgive me, a BS apology, you know, because his mom made him, you know. We were like, yeah, all right, you know, we were like, yeah, okay, you know, but things weren't the same after that, because even though, you know, when you're a kid, you're kind of like let things slide, you know, but it really wasn't the same. And he was basically instructed by his mom to leave us alone, you know, by the parents, because we were minors, we were younger, any way you looked at it. He was an older kid. And, you know, any parent, you know, if I know that there's a kid trying to do that to my kid, that's not a good thing, you know. So, yeah. So it's that common enemy, you know, that gets the same type of people at each other's throats. That's what we got. I know, guys, I tell stories. I take an hour to cook minute rice. I know, I get it. You know, that's what the fast forward button thing is for. You won't hurt my feelings, promise. I promise. Yeah, that common enemy that we all have. We have that enemy that wants to just for giggles, just for giggles. And because this enemy is jealous of what we have, of who we are. This enemy is jealous because this enemy forfeited something that they once had and we still have. They once had something that we have and they don't. And that is a chance at eternity next to our Creator. And you see, this enemy that we all have, because remember, our battle is not against flesh and blood, right? This enemy that we all have is extremely jealous of what we have and wants to have us at each other's throats and wants us to be divided and wants us to believe that the enemy is within us, that the enemy is among us, that we are each other's enemy. And if we put down our weapons just for a second, if we all just calm down for a few ticks and we look at the broad picture and step back, we realize that we all want the same thing. We all want to raise our families. We all want fair wages. We all want to enjoy life the way that our Creator intended for us to enjoy. We want to do good unto others as others do good unto us. We want to protect the sanctity of our creation, of the essence of the reason why we were created to begin with. We really do want that. It's just that our enemy is into the details and has heavily indoctrinated us in so many cultures that gets us to think that we need to do this, or we need to do that, or we need to do the other to have an identity of who we are. And I'm over here, so I'm this way, and you're not like me because you're over there and you're that way. And in reality, we're no different. Just because you speak certain language and I speak another, we're really not different. We all share that same common enemy that tells you that the boogeyman is me and tells me that you are the boogeyman, when the real boogeyman is the one that's knocking on our door telling us, hey, your buddy's talking crap about you. He said this and that and the other, so you can't fight. And hey, goes knock on the door on the other guy, because he knows we're buddies. He knows that we would not have any issues had he not knocked on our doors and tried to convince and manipulate the narrative that, hey, that guy, he's hating on you, when the one that's really hating on us is the one that's trying to whisper in our ear, telling us to hate one another for his amusement. Yeah. So that as the thought of the morning, thought of the day, I haven't been coming on here. I've been dealing with some personal things on my own, and I've been trying to keep myself from spewing, I don't know. I've just been dealing with stuff, and been trying to gather myself for the sake of a meaningful message. So that's the main reason, if anything, I haven't been out here as often as I usually are. But yeah, we all share the same common enemy. Our battle's not flesh. Our battle is not against flesh and blood, right? Even though man, it sure feels like it is sometimes, right? We all feel that sometimes because our real common enemy has done such a good job of indoctrinating us to such a deep level, such a strong degree, that it's hard for us to find that common ground. But nothing could be more important for the eternal outcome of our species, of our creation. Nothing could be more important than to realize who our true enemy is, and to realize that it's not me and you, and it's not me against you, that we really all want the same thing. It's just that we don't know what's good for us. We can't even trust our own hearts. A reason why I gravitate towards Jesus Christ's teachings is because I have found them to be the least selfish. And there is no greater love. There is no greater love than one that lays down his life for his friends. Jesus Christ came and showed us the utmost level of love, because he didn't just die for those that revered him and learned to love him because he chose them to follow him. He loved those that spat on him. He loved those that put that crown of thorns on his head and tortured him. He loved those that ripped his skin off his bones with those medieval tools of torture and death. He showed us what perfect love is. That's the standard. That's why I follow Jesus Christ. And we should all be able to add that name as our last name. We should all be able to add that to our name, or as our first name. As part of our name, we should all be able to add the Christ. But we can't do that until we take on the blueprint, until we take on the sacrifice, until we'll accept that what Jesus Christ, Yeshua HaMashiach, came to give us was that true path of redemption, that true path of righteousness towards the truth of who we were created to be. Because as long as we continue to hold on to the lies that were given to us by our common enemy, we'll just keep hating each other. So, yeah. Bless you guys, and that's all I got. Catch you on the next one.